I want to give everybody a little behind the scenes preview. Then I have 2 questions for you that you got to answer honestly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll get into a story that I know you have to tell. Okay?
I'm going to ask you questions then.
Fine, bring it. Okay, so the behind the scenes stuff is you and I typically have a very quick conversation about, hey, what should we talk about on the pod?
Uh-huh.
And almost all the time, like it gets my brain going like, oh, this and this and this. And I get really excited, but we don't generally rehearse like this is what we're going to talk about and all that. So we had this conversation this morning, but what it got me thinking about before I get to these 2 questions is this notion of like when stand-up comedians do like crowd work, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, or when rappers do like freestyle battles,
Mm-hmm.
or when Gary Vee does that crowd work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he takes questions and all this kind of stuff. There's something about that dynamic that I think is really interesting in terms of going from just, I got ideas and bridging the gap of putting them out there in the world. It's kind of like real live testing of stuff, which uncovers so much shit, which is cool. So with that in your head and putting that in the head of everyone who's listening and watching, here's the 2 questions. Do you think you're an expert in sales?
Do I think I'm an expert in sales? I think the word expert's a funny term.
Okay.
I think it's so relative. I think I understand how to sell things as much as someone else. I guess like you could look at it and like I sold cars before,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
To sell cars, you have talk tracks and tactics, and there's ways to get to the close, and there's a little math, but it's not overcomplicated. It's more of like how you talk to someone, the things you say, the objection handling, all that stuff. So that's like, okay, you can be the best car salesman in the world and you're doing that. But at the end of the day, it's how you make someone feel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And are you solving a need?
Yeah.
And so are you an expert at that? Like it's situational. I think
Yeah.
sometimes you can be and sometimes you're not. There's certainly people that are really good at sales because they make people feel good.
Yeah.
And I think I could be that if I needed to.
All right. That was a really good answer. And I would co-sign that, knowing you. The second question, are you an expert in 401ks?
No, not at all. Not at all. Which I want to address something though, because I think you set this up well in that kind of live on the spot Q&A thing. I've actually never have been in that position until recently. I get questions, but they're usually about my story, really specific, kind of general questions about marketing or branding or building a business. But in this case, I was doing an event recently where I don't want to call it like a keynote speaker because it was rather small, but it was a networking event.
Sure.
And my friend wanted me to come in, and he prompted me with a couple questions. I answered them, told some of the stories. And then I had a bunch of people come up to me after, a line of a few people at least, and they were presenting me with their businesses and the issues they face or the challenges that they have. And that was really interesting because to your point, I didn't know anything about 401ks. I mean, I know about 401ks generally, probably as much as the next person, but a guy comes up to me and he starts asking about his 401k business, and he's having challenges getting people on the phone to talk about 401ks. And I was just like, oh shit, like, I don't even know where to go here. But by the end of the conversation, I felt really good about the advice I gave him, but I had no idea like where I was going. And then I thought about it. I took a step back and I'm like, this can apply to anything.
Yeah. Well, so let's get into that specifically, because I think if we frame it right, even if you're not selling 401ks, it might help unlock the way that you're approaching whatever problem you might have in your business of how do you break through it in some way.
I think in order to get to the real kind of conclusion or to get to the insight that we had together, I need to talk about quickly how I got there, because I think anyone can use this to help others or to think about their own business, because I didn't know even what I was doing. It was happening like real time, but I was using like what I talk about, and that was asking a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
So the first thing I said I asked him, because he was talking about his problem. His problem was when he calls someone and wants to talk about a 401k, most business owners don't care. And he was frustrated that they don't care about 401ks. And my first question was, well, do you think it is that they don't care about 401ks, or is there a problem you're actually trying to solve regarding 401ks, and how are you positioning it? And he said, well, I'm calling them and bringing up the word 401k. And right away, I felt like I was on the other side of the person he'd be talking to.
Sure.
And I wasn't interested. Like, I was just like, okay, this is like, it's not a problem I have right now, right?
And it's boring as shit for most people. There might be some people that are really excited about 401ks, but yeah.
Correct.
It's the problem that this is boring and no one cares.
Correct. And I say this loosely because like 401ks are important.
Sure.
But like, as far as the topic of 401ks and what we had talked about, like, it was really like, oh my God, how am I going to help this guy? Like, I felt a little bit nervous that he's asking me for advice. So then I asked him a question about, okay, what problem are you trying to solve? Like, what makes you different than anyone else selling 401ks? And he was having a hard time telling me. And I'm like, okay. So then I had to come up with questions that he may not have thought of. And one of those was, I thought about my experience in signing up for 401k through our company. My experience was I wanted our company to have the benefit of a 401k. Our employees.
To be specific, you're talking about you as an employer setting this up, not you as an employee.
Correct.
Getting the 401k that's offered.
So like, because his audience is business owners.
Exactly. Yep.
And trying to get them to switch or sign up for 401ks, right?
Right.
Well, I did ask him, like, how many businesses you talk to that don't have a 401k? Because there is regulation that, in Illinois at least, that you have to have a 401k.
Right.
So he's just like, well, actually not many. So I'm like, oh, so it's not like his goal is to talk people into getting 401ks. It's to either switch to him as a provider for the 401k or to let him do a deep analysis of the 401k. Right. Either way, it's not that, like for me, it wasn't that exciting. Then I was asking him, I said, well, have you ever heard or seen any of these 401k kind of services that attach to like QuickBooks or attach to your ERP or payroll provider like Gusto? What I mean by that was, as an employer, you have somewhere where you're paying employees, right? That's QuickBooks, that could be ADP, Gusto, there's ADP, there's all these. Those services have offerings to complement payroll.
Sure.
And typically 401ks, and one of them sometimes is medical benefits, or they have third-party providers that they connect to. I'm sure they get a commission from. So from an employer perspective, it's really easy for me to go to the integrated third parties that QuickBooks had worked with when we were on QuickBooks, and you just click a box to say, like, I want to offer 401k. And there's a company called Guideline, and Guideline is a big provider. So my mind went to, who is a competitor of you? Like, that's just general and generic. It's like, okay, who's the enemy that you're going after here, right? The enemy isn't the employer. The enemy isn't the employee. The enemy is the, I would say, generic 401ks. That's what he's going against. I said, have you heard of Guideline? He goes, yeah, absolutely. And he goes, Guideline doesn't even allow you to customize your 401k. I'm like, boom.
Right.
You just nailed it. I go, but what is that? Okay, so like, what does that mean? And he goes, well, if you can't customize your 401k, meaning like you can't choose the investments that you're in. This is what she's telling me. I don't know how much of this is fact. So this is not anti-Guideline, but he's telling me, like, you're not allowed to pick your investments, or you're limited to the investments within Guidelines. So that means, the way he was telling me this is, like, as an employee and you have a Guideline plan, you're limited by, like, oh, I want to invest in this fund or this fund or this fund, which typical 401ks, you can do that. I go, all right, that's great. So you lack options and control, but what does that mean long term, right? So then he's like, well, that means that, like, you can leave money on the table. I'm like, fantastic. I'm like, so what you're saying is the folks that choose Guideline are inevitably leaving money on the table for their employees. So, like, if you compound it, like, what do you think that could be? And he starts answering it. I said, well, if it's over like a 20-year span, what does that add up to? He's like, I don't know, it could be like $1 million. And I was like, okay, so what you're telling me is the folks that are on Guideline versus a customized plan, you can potentially find savings of upwards of $1 million. And you could discover this just by having a conversation. And I go, how many people do you think are on Guideline? He's like, tens of thousands of people. I'm like, wouldn't that be a really good target to go after? Yeah. So then all of a sudden you have this story, and I'm like, wait, but that's not enough. Because if you call me and you're like, hey, I could get your employees to get an extra $1 million, I'm like, that's great. But like, some business owners are going to be like, I just don't have time for that. Like, whatever. Right. Like, what's in it for the business owner too, right? Yep. So then you got to dig into that. So we started exploring that a bit. And that was more of like, well, the business owner will also be able to get these benefits, and I could even make it more hands off and blah, blah. So it was just like, we got to a place by having the conversation of the pitch isn't, hey, let me talk to you about your 401k. The pitch is, are you on guideline by chance? Because if you are, or a service like that, I can get your employees up to $1 million more
Right.
for their retirement. And all I need is like 10 minutes of your time.
Right.
Like, does that sound like a good use of time? And I'm like, just imagine that difference between like, hey, can I talk to you about your 401k?
Yeah.
Because there's nothing in it for me. I'm like, I
Yeah.
already have a 401k.
Right.
So that was it.
See, that's so awesome to hear, right? I don't know anything about 401ks or Guideline or anything like that as well. That's kind of the point. But Guideline or Gusto or whomever is selling to the employer convenience, right? And that's what he's trying to go, well, I'm selling control or optimization or, whatever else it is. I'm not selling 401k.
Right. And he could even position it as like, hey, great job. Like, you got your employees on a 401k. How about now, like, we optimize it? And you and your employees, because I'm sure you're in the 401k, you and your employees can, earn an
Right.
extra X, Y, and Z because we're really good at what we do. And we could maximize the output of your returns. And over time, that could mean millions of dollars more in your pocket. And you're like, okay, well, what's it take to get an audit done? And then you close with, I just need like 10 minutes of your time. And after that, we'll see if we're a good fit. I would stop there. I wouldn't even get into what we need.
Right.
I would just stop there. Right.
Right.
And then you get that appointment and you get in there and then you ask the questions. And then now if I took it a step further and he's calling me and he's digging into it, I'm starting with that same framework. I'm not going into a pitch deck or like
Right.
anything like that about me. I could give a shit.
Right.
It's again about how you're going to solve my problem. And he's like, here's what I've seen. Here's what I have seen with these other businesses. I've been able to save an average of X, Y, and Z, or get people to, maybe save's the wrong word, but like get people to earn more just in the course of like a year or two. I've been doing this for 8 years, really good at it. By the way, we're the best in the space. And then you start to add the credibility after you solve the problem, because it's like, the first thing is like, you got to get in the door, and then it's like, okay, is this the right guy for me?
Yeah. We obviously talk so much about curiosity all the time. We might have even said at some point the way that that's connected to empathy, right? Like if you don't care, you're probably not that likely to be too curious. Maybe you are in some ways, but there's probably a limiter there in terms of how you would take action. You could be curious, but you're not going to take action if you don't really care, kind of thing. And that's what this is doing, of putting this guy on the other side of the table being like, why would Joe care? Why would an employer care about this? Like, what's their emotional need, not their technical need, right? They already got the 401k. They already got whatever. I check that box. I don't want to think about it anymore, versus your emotional needs constantly need a kind of satisfaction, Maslow's, hierarchy of needs, all that kind of stuff. And
right. And there's no doubt the contrast of how he approached the conversation from the beginning of the 401k to the end, or to that other way to pitch it. There's no way that's not going to yield him better benefits. It's like, I think, impossible.
right.
Because you're just not going to, I don't know anyone that, like, if you call them up, be like, hey, can you talk about 401k? Like, mark a spam. Like, it's just like, just don't know. Because, I mean, you just don't, and that's such a hard job. So it's like, you got to put you got to give yourself an opportunity to win there, And he worked for a big financial services firm. He was just in charge of the 401ks and was having a hard time.
Right.
So I think that really comes down to, you're not selling what you think you're selling. What you're selling is the ability for you to solve a problem and give a benefit to that said person on the other end, even if they don't know that they have a problem. So you have to sell the problem that you don't know exists, because I didn't even know that existed. And then once you sell the problem and you identify it, then you start to get into the brief solutioning of like some facts, and then maybe a tease and some credibility, but you kind of leave it at that. All too often, we talked about this, I've seen people close deals and then open deals and close deals in the same conversation. Like, because you just keep going. And then when somebody talks, I'm guilty of this, like I could blab on more than I should, but I have learned, like, when someone says yes, you just shut up. Shut up. So excited to work with you, let them talk. I have a friend that I would watch do this, like, constantly, like in the early days in digital marketing, and I was just like,
done, got it.
God, I would kick him.
Yeah.
I'm like, It was nuts.
We have a mutual friend who I won't name him, and we'll see if he listens to this because then he'll shout us out afterwards. But he was in the restaurant business, and he would tell all of his employees, like, we don't sell food. We sell reasons for people to come back. And it was like such an unlock in terms of really understanding what the hospitality industry is all about, right? Like, you don't go out to eat. You go out for everything else
That's
around
good.
all that kind of stuff. And I think about that with Go. Like, we don't sell beer. Like, we're selling inclusion. We're selling empowerment. Like, that's the kind of thing that people get more out of than this great tasting award-winning beer, which we have also.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. All right. Good stuff.
Till next week.